On this week's show, the Georgia Southern football team adds 3 coaches to their offensive staff, including coordinator Brian Cook. We also have highlights from men's and women's basketball, all this and more as we welcome you inside the Eagles Nest. And welcome inside the Eagles Nest. I'm your host, Josh Aubrey, being joined by Mike Anthony, sports editor and Georgia Southern beat writer for the Statesboro Herald. Mike, once again, we have basketball behind us on the screens, but we're going to lead with football. Let's get all into finishing things off as far as the offense goes. It looks like all the puzzle pieces are in place for next year. So far, the Georgia Southern Eagles have announced that their offensive coordinator will be Brian Cook, who comes from Georgia Tech, where he spent the last 3 years. Prior to that, he was at Cal Poly, where he was with Justin Wood, who comes here with a funny spelling of the name Justin. I think of that and I forget the last name, but Justin Wood will be the wide receivers coach. He was the offense coordinator this year at Cal Poly, and joining them will be a familiar name, and that's Bob Bodine, who was at Georgia Southern with Paul Johnson's staff, carried over a little bit with Mike Sewak's staff. Most recently was with Jeff Monken's staff at Army, where he was their offensive line coach. He will be the offensive line coach at Georgia Southern. I would think with all these pieces in place, it seems like the running option attack has 3 people with familiarity with those offenses. Seems like a little better fit than what was here before. Everything looks on paper like it should work for the future.
Right, and looking at last season when Coach Tyson Summers was announced as the new head coach, he said from day one that he wanted to keep Georgia Southern as a gun option team, and I think that when it came down to it, with the offensive coordinators he brought in, he was trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and try as they might, they couldn't get it done. I don't think that's going to be nearly an issue with the new offensive staff coming to town, although they've maybe worked on different iterations of the option. At some point, all those roads have come together. I think that all of them will be on the same page from day one, whereas last year it may have been some tinkering, some trying to figure out how exactly to run an option offense. I think it'll be a lot easier to hit the ground running, pardon the pun, this time around.
Well, with Bob Bodine, most of his has been under center. With Brian Cook, he's done under center with Paul, but then again, he's done from the shotgun at Cal Poly. And of course, with Justin, he comes in, Justin Wood comes in from Cal Poly, where they were working out of the shotgun more. Do you think it will be based upon the personnel, whether they go under center or whether they're shotgun, or do you think it's pretty much a done deal that they'll be in the shotgun?
Well, every coach is going to have their own idea of how things would work perfectly, but any coach worth their weight is going to measure what they want to do against what they see on the field, and I think that leaves spring practice as a very important few weeks for Georgia Southern, with 2 senior quarterbacks departing. A lot of different guys with different skill sets are going to be in camp. They're going to be the ones getting the reps with the 1s and 2s, so they'll have to prove what they can do, and based on who shows out, who looks like they're ready to step up and become the leader of this offense, I think then you go back to work, maybe tweaking some things where quarterback A can do this. We can run these packages with quarterback B, and that's where I think that there's a little bit of an advantage with, as you said, a couple of different mentalities on how to run the option, different styles of how to run the option. I wouldn't doubt that we'll see a lot of different things coming next year, both under center and out of the gun. I think that could be a positive for Georgia Southern, not just sticking to one tight family option tree, branching out a little bit. More puns.
We like those puns there, Mike. One thing that these 3 guys coming into this offense, all 3 bring, is some experience as offensive coordinators in the past. Do you think that'll be a positive going through because of the fact that they all have run offenses before, or do you think it might get into, too many cooks trying to get together, pardon the pun with the cook, too many cooks spoil the soup?
Well, I think that they'll have to do internally. They've got to work out. Obviously, Brian Cook is the offensive coordinator. It's his show to run. I think that these are all coaching veterans who have been in, positions where they dictate what happens with the offense. They've been in positions where they're position coaches and they're having to follow along with someone else's plan. I think that with that professionalism, with that experience, it won't be too much of a stretch. And I also think it could be a positive in that they know that it's more than just getting their line or running backs or receivers or quarterbacks. It's more than just coaching that unit. They know from their offensive coordinating experience that it's all about being just one cog in a bigger machine. So maybe that helps a little bit there, not so much to just prepare and focus on one thing, even if you are just a position coach, but to have a feel for how the offense is going to work, know what little things need to be done to make a certain position fit better into the offense as a whole.
I think that one thing they can maybe learn from the past, you look out there a lot last year and there was a lot of confusion out there. It didn't seem like maybe everybody was on the same page. I would hope, if nothing else, they'll all be united and everyone will know their roles and that they can, the terminology and things like that will all be something that they're pretty cohesive about. Well, let's shift gears and go to the sport that's going on right now in the middle of the season, and that's basketball, where the Georgia Southern men's basketball team had come off a couple of pretty impressive wins down in Florida, then just lost what would have been a huge win for them at Winthrop. They've got a game coming up on Thursday. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But first of all, Mike, how do you think that the guys go into getting ready for the new year?
Well, it was a real tough loss there against Winthrop. This is a team that they hadn't beaten before. Winthrop, a mid-major team that has been to the tournament, has won a few games in the tournament before. They're always a favorite to win in the Big South. And Georgia Southern, to their credit, they walked right into Winthrop's backyard, and for most of the game they pushed them around. But unfortunately, it's a story that we've seen a few times this season. If the games were 35 minutes long, Georgia Southern might be 10-2, 9-3. Instead, they're standing at 6-6. They give up a big run midway through the second half. They fight back, take a little bit of a lead late, but back and forth, and they just came up on the short end at the very end of the game. But overall, still a lot of positives to take. It's just 40 full minutes is what they need, and they're running out of time to practice doing that because they've got a game that should be a pretty winnable one on Thursday against Fisk. But after that, a little bit of a week off to prepare, get the legs fresh, and then on New Year's Eve, Georgia State comes to town, and that's when they really start to count. That's Sun Belt play.
All right, as for the women, they've struggled a little bit more than the guys have. That win with Savannah State seems like a long time ago. They've struggled. They've lost a couple of close games, and they have a big matchup as well that we're about to take a look at. Some highlights from her. How do you feel about where the women are?
Well, I think that they're not right where they want to be, but I don't think that they're too discouraged about their record with only 3 wins. Not exactly where you want to be, but some of those games on the road, a bunch like the men have been. Then when they got to come home last week, they play a UCF team that's very, very good, probably a little bit above the Georgia Southern women's weight class there. They weren't able to contend with them, but kind of in the same boat as the men where they get a game that's a little bit more winnable. Hopefully they can get a little bit of momentum rolling because they're in the same boat again as the men on New Year's Eve, an early morning game. Come out and see it. Not too often you get to watch 10:30 a.m. basketball, but it's going to be a good one. It's a rivalry just as much for the women as it is for the men, and a 1-0 start against a team that they've had some success with the last couple of years. A 1-0 start in conference play could be just the positive momentum boost that the women's team needs.
Well, a doubleheader on Thursday. Let's get out and take a look at some of the highlights. The first of 2 at Hanner Fieldhouse, seeing the Lady Eagles hosting South Carolina State. Second half action, the Eagles in control. Amira Atwater, the pull-up jumper. She'd have 10 points. Atwater with the hot hand as she extends the lead to 49-40. The Bulldogs cut into the lead as Bryisha Blair hits for 3 of her 15, but the Eagles respond. Alexis Brown pulls up for the baseline jumper. Next, it's Nicole Franks hitting the 3-pointer. The Eagles up by 14. More from Franks as she penetrates in for the lefty layup. Franks then spots Brown. The Eagles only 5 of 25 from 3, but up by 16 here. Patrice Butler leading the way for Georgia Southern with 21 points and 7 rebounds. And finally, more from Butler. She comes through with the hoop and the foul as the Eagles roll 74-58. Georgia Southern men hosting Fisk from Nashville, Tennessee, and this one was all Eagles. Ike Smith starts things off with The two-handed jam. Next, Smith drives, then dishes to Tukey Brown for the corner three. Back to Smith we go, and this time he'll drive in for the hoop and the foul. He finished with 13 points. A nice game for Monte Glenn, who would add 14 points and 5 rebounds. Tukey Brown later with one of his 7 assists. This one to Devontae Boykins. Next, Tukey will bury the three-pointer. He'd lead the way with 20 points. The Eagles up by 15. Brown not only hitting from long distance as he penetrates for 2 more. The Tukey Brown show continues as he comes through with the hoop and the foul. 20 points in only 20 minutes of play. Ike Smith later with the corner three. And finally, check out the spin move by Brown as the Eagles will roll 106-58.
New Year's is coming fast. If you're ready to celebrate, we're ready to help. Franklin Chevrolet in Statesboro. No need to wait till New Year's Eve to have fun. We're getting the party started right now with special year-end pricing. The holiday feeling is in full swing, but the clock is ticking on the old year and on these year-end savings too, so don't wait. Franklin Chevrolet in Statesboro. You'll feel appreciated because you are. Come in or see us on the web.
All right, so next up, the doubleheader will take place 10 o'clock on New Year's Eve. That game take 10 a.m., obviously, and then the guys will play right after that. It's a doubleheader against Georgia State. Get out there and see the Eagles. We thank you for joining us. For Mike Anthony, I'm Josh Aubrey, and hope to see you again soon.